In this video, we're going to go over a step-by-step tutorial for the motion you're looking at here, otherwise known as a trap bar shrug row. At least that's what I call it. So the trap bar shrug row, it's exactly what it sounds like, and it's a very unique variation because it's going to do a lot of different things that I think actually function as an improvement over the typical barbell row, and we'll talk about why. But this is really going to be an exercise that's going to hammer the middle traps most specifically, and also the upper traps. And in the context of this exercise, the middle and the upper traps are going to do two things primarily. Number one is they're going to pull the shoulder blades upward, aka elevation with a little bit of upward rotation. And then they're also going to pull the shoulder blades backward to a small degree, again, in the context of this exercise. That's also known as retraction, by the way, if you've heard it said that way. So this is an exercise that basically loads the middle and upper traps via that motion of elevation and that motion of retraction, and kind of a combination of those two things. So the first thing that we need to look at is kind of this perspective from the side. And the reason it's important to look at this from the side is to look at a couple things. So the first thing to look at and to notice is the torso angle. Many people assume that having your torso this upright in any kind of free weight row is heinous, right? Is crazy. Because most people assume that your torso needs to be kind of parallel to the floor. Don't know why people generally think that, probably just because it's the way that people have done bent over rows. But in the context of training the middle and the upper traps, it's going to be very important actually to keep this more upright posture for two main reasons. One is the actual loading of the tissues, and two is the ease of stability in this exercise that staying more upright will create. So to tackle the first one, if you think about where the upper traps and the middle traps are, the upper traps kind of run backward like this, and they're going to pull in that direction. The middle traps kind of have a splay of fibers which run all the way from here to here to here, all the way over that way, right? So basically that couple of arrows, that grouping of arrows, is basically just meant to show you all that the upper traps kind of pull this way, the middle traps kind of pull that way, and because the resistance in the hands is trying to ultimately pull the shoulder blade off the body, the upper and the middle traps are going to be the tissues that basically prevent this bar from pulling my shoulders, again, forward and downward off my body. And so that's all to say that in order to load these tissues, we need to be at a slight angle, right? Because if you picture if my torso were all the way bent forward like this and my head was over here, then my shoulders would kind of be getting pulled downward and forward, but way more forward compared to downward. And if the shoulders from this perspective were getting pulled that way, well, then tissues like my upper lats, as well as my rhomboids, they would play a little bit of a bigger role. Rhomboids would be somewhere up here in resisting that forward tug of the load. So to target the middle and the upper traps, we want the load to be more downward compared to more forward, whereas to target the lats, we would want the load to be more forward, okay? So that's reason number one, is just, hey, how do we load the middle and the upper traps? That's a big way, easy way to do it. And then number two, I mentioned the stability aspect. Notice how close my hips are to my hands, right? So if the load is applied over here and it's pulling downward, look at how close my hip is, my low back is, all these segments of my spines, if I extend that resistance upward, look at how close that is compared to, imagine if my hips were all the way over here, right? Then the load would be going downward this way, and I'd have so much more resistance on my hips. I'd have so much more resistance on all basically these segments right here of my low back. And a lot of times barbell bent over rows end up basically feeling like a low back / hip exercise. And that's for a reason, right? So staying more upright makes it more specific to actually loading this action of elevation that we talked about, which is a primary function of the middle and the upper traps. And then also, just conveniently, it's going to make it easier to stabilize our hips and our low back against the load, right? Just not nearly as much resistance going through there. And the only reason, by the way, that we can even do it at like any of this in as easy of a way as we can here is because of the fact that we have this hex bar that we can stand in the middle of. Right? So if I had a barbell and the barbell was over here out in front of me somewhere, then it would be so much harder to not get pulled forward because I can't actually pull the bar through my body, right? But with this, the resistance is basically just going boom straight down through my midfoot and heel. So it's super easy to stabilize. Now, when it comes to execution, we want to focus on two major things. The first is going to be to allow the elbows to flare outward, as I'm indicating here. And the way that I would cue that for yourself is to almost imagine that you're pulling your elbows literally out to the sides. Because a lot of times when people try to pull upward with their hands, they end up pulling their hands to their shoulders. And they end up feeling a lot of biceps, a lot of brachioradialis, a lot of brachialis, which sits underneath of there, and a lot of forearm stuff as compared to their shoulders. So pull with the elbows outward and lead with the elbows outward so that you can really concentrate on loading the shoulders as opposed to anything else. And then in tandem with that, meaning at the same exact time, you want to imagine shrugging upward and backward, right? So this is not quite a shrug. This is not quite a row, which is why I call it a shrug row. Of course, you could consider it either one of those things, but I like to call it a shrug row because it's not just purely like you thinking about pulling with your arm. And it's not purely just a shoulder shrug thing, but it's a combination of both that need to be happening simultaneously. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here too is these arrows. These arrows are going upward and inward because that is how your shoulder blades actually move. It sounds kind of silly, intuitive just to say that's how your shoulder blades move, but watch what happens. I mean, look at me in this little circle here. If I shrug upward, do you all see how my shoulders are actually not moving upward just straight to the ceiling? They're actually operating at a diagonal or moving at a diagonal inward, kind of like they're coming to a peak, like a pyramid. So as you pull upward, you're also pulling inward and backward. And even if you do this unloaded, do it right now as you're watching, pull your shoulder blades upward, inward, and backward, almost like you're trying to hug your shoulders to the back of your neck. You're going to feel the middle traps just like screaming. Okay, now imagine doing that with load. That's essentially what we have here. Okay, so if I let this play again, I'll just kind of let this play through a number more times now so you can actually observe me doing it. Basically, the motion is simple. Hinge over just very, very slightly so that, again, your low back, your hips are stabilized. Number one. Number two, make sure that you're, again, loading at that appropriate angle that we talked about, slightly forward, but mostly downward. And then number 3 and 4, make sure that you're shrugging your shoulders inward, upward, and backward according to that resistance, and that you're allowing your elbows to kind of flare outward as you pull so that you don't end up pulling too much with your sort of hands and your forearms and your elbows. Now, the last thing that I'll sort of show you all, and you'll have seen it in the way that I ended that set, is that I kind of end the set with a little bit of a kind of just a pure shrug thing. As you can see, I'm still attempting to pull with my elbow, so I'm still actually trying to do it like it's a row. My elbow's going sort of backward and outward, as we mentioned earlier. But I'm just kind of allowing myself to try to shrug the load the rest of the way. As if I could just keep performing reps in that partial end of the range. So allowing that range to kind of drop off and decrease as you fatigue. What you'll notice is early in the set, you'll be able to pull like I'm pulling here right now, elbows coming up and back. But then as you get more and more tired in the set, you're not going to be able to pull as high. If you really want to just demolish the middle traps and the upper traps at the end of the set, I would just recommend allowing that range of motion to decrease as you see it decreasing here. You're going to be able to perform a couple partial shrugs toward the end of a set. That's perfectly fine. And you may even get more out of the set by, allowing yourself to really get to that point. This video that we looked at to analyze this exercise and go through this tutorial, it's taken directly from my exercise library. There's over 310, 315 other exercises currently in the library. So if you're interested in getting a full library to totally take the guesswork and the confusion out of lifting, there's exercises for every single major muscle group in the body in there, searchable library, and you can request a tutorial at any time if you want an exercise added. So I hope you all enjoy this exercise analysis. Please comment below what exercises you want me to cover next and go over in a kind of step-by-step tutorial fashion, just like I did with this one.